first of all, I wanted to touch base a little bit on the equation of business, because I found it very interesting when we spoke about it that, as you mentioned, it's not a set of business rules, but it's actually a real equation, as you described it. Can you perhaps just develop that a little bit?
That is good. Yes, it is. First of all, it's not like a law in physics. You're not describing the world. It's more like a recipe. Remember the 3 tablespoons of sugar and the 2 egg yolks. So it's how you like to put stuff together. So in that sense, it is similar to business rules. The difference is that it's more oriented towards the bottom line, that the equation of your business is what you want to optimize. I mean, to some degree, we all have an equation of life where we trade off certain things. That, we study hard, so someday we can sit on stage and talk to each other, as opposed to just lie on the beach or whatever people do here in Barcelona.
Very true, very true. On the topic of the equation of business, as you described, you spent a long time finding that for Amazon. Did you see it change over time, or once you found it, that was something that you could use throughout, or yeah?
So Jeff Bezos always says, it's not enough to just focus on the things that change. You also have to focus on the things that don't change. And customer centricity, that relentless focus of trying to see the world from the perspective of the customer, that is one of the invariants from day one at Amazon. What of course has changed, if you think about how our behaviors have changed. I mean, let's do a show of hands here. Who of you has ever bought something because it was recommended to you by Amazon? Pretty much everybody. So it changes the dynamic system, and being aware of that, I think, entails a change of equation. An example would be call center. So the other day, I called an airline, and I have lifelong gold status on that airline, million miles flyer, and basically it went like this: your call is very important to us. Please hold the line. The estimated wait time is 67 minutes. Your call is very important to us. What a joke. So if you can rearrange this, if you can get a feeling about whether the person has just a quick question or wants to have an in-depth conversation or just wants to have any conversation, you can do a much better job in allocating your scarce resources.
What advice would you say to people in our industry? Because one would perhaps assume that the underlying equation of business is very similar to this category, as we function with the sort of the same products and the same channels we market ourselves and sell through. How would you challenge us to find our underlying equation of business? And do you reckon it's the same across the category, or is it more company specific?
So my view is that to get inspired, to come up with questions, you need to have domain knowledge. So I'm a big fan. I mean, my PhD advisor was a cognitive psychologist as well as a machine learning guy. But I'm a big fan of actually talking to people. So for instance, John Doerr at the Amazon board, Tanner Perkins guy, he asked him on board meeting, why do people come to Amazon? Expecting me to just come up with some, random, not random, I mean, just some analysis and say, this is why people come. Okay, question accepted. And I asked the next 100,000 people, why do you come to Amazon? And I had a very, very smart intern, actually work at Amazon, Dave Liu, who just on the go basically wrote scripts which parsed those. And then at the end, I knew why people said they came to Amazon. It was very interesting reading. And then the interesting thing is, I mentioned before the merging of different data sets, the combining online with offline data. In that case, the really interesting thing was to look at, well, people, what they say and what they actually do. And there we found, and then we of course knew whether they bought, how much they bought, what the profit margin was. So basically that piece of work led to the creation of A9, which was a search company. Amazon spent several million on, because we realized that product search was pretty broken.
Yeah.
So I remember the example we had, somebody entered green pants, and they got to see all kinds of books about green pants, but no green pants, because the underlying data model didn't realize that green was a color and pants is something to wear, as opposed to just looking for the string green pants on books.
Yeah.
So that's an example where you find something and you start by trying to ask the consumer what he wants. Now, my question to you guys is, why do people actually come and do gambling? Why do they do online gaming? I mean, that I think would be the starting point for me. And then you could try to find out whether what they say is actually what is true.
Yeah. Because that could be different, definitely.
Yeah. There's a bunch of Stanford students, and they have a startup called Chatulous. And it is surprising. They actually go there, it's sort of AOL chat rooms, 2013 style. And they say it's amazing just how many people are bored. They want to kill time and stuff. So maybe we are not the typical people. So it's always a bit dangerous to generalize from our lives to the remaining 7 billion people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a good answer, and I think that's one way could go around it. Good job. So moving on, I think you touched upon it in your presentation as well, and I think it's, especially for me as a marketeer, it's very interesting because the last couple of years we've seen a big change in the landscape, both in terms of media consumption, but also how consumers behave. And I face that every day, and I think a lot of people face that, is that it puts a lot of new requirements on marketing organizations, not only how you communicate, but also what you communicate and where you communicate. It's becoming almost rocket science. I mean, do you have any advice on this? How should marketing organizations transform themselves to cope with this?
So Amazon killed its marketing department about 10 years ago.
That's bad news.
Because with all the experiments we did, we found that the data consumers create, whether it's implicit data, whether it's explicit data, whether it's situational data that you know on Mother's Day, if two people with the same last name, one of them is a woman, gets bought something, she probably is the mom of the other person. And social data, I shared with you with the share the love example. We just found that data trumps people in the case of a relatively structured e-commerce site.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, having talked to some of you here, I think people know that here too, that the amount you pay to acquire a new customer, what offers you show to them, when. I don't know any secrets here, but I think I did a study in the late 90s at NYU where we looked at 30 million T-bond futures trades. So it's like gambling, right?
Yeah.
It's just in Chicago. The difference, I think, in this is that if you lose money on Wall Street, the government bails you out. If you lose money, if you win money, you can keep it or something like this. Yeah. That's the difference to here. But in those, we found that the last trade had a huge impact when we modeled predictive behavior of the next one, of what the person was going to do next. So I think those so-called hidden Markov models, I am sure that everybody here must be using since we had them in the 90s.
Yeah, most likely. It's a very interesting comment because this is a sector that pays and a lot of money in marketing. A lot of companies spend upwards to 50% of their revenues on traditional marketing. Yeah.
But the great thing you have is that you don't have to go out inventory. I think people have not yet run out of copies of World of Warcraft or something like this, right?
No, most likely not. No, that's a very good point. Moving on a little bit, I think it was very interesting to read and see your thoughts around the connected consumer and the connected individual rather than a consumer, perhaps. And it ties back a little bit to marketing in general and perhaps the changing face of marketing, that brands now, they need to interact with their consumers who are to a certain extent interacting much more with your brand through others than with you. And I think that is the biggest challenge I face as a marketeer in my daily job. And I would love to hire you as a consultant to solve that for me. But I think that would be a little bit costly. But maybe you can give me a few minutes of advice.
I would start with the ABC. A stands for approval. So people share stuff because they want approval. I used to say A stands for attention. And then a friend of mine, Daniel Kahneman, he said, Andreas, there are shame cultures where attention is not what you want. And sometimes I think Germany seems to be that way. But approval. Approval is really the A in the ABC. B stands for belonging. That particularly in this fragmented world, I mean, having something you belong to, let's say a group you belong to, is something which is the second driver for marketing. And the third one, C, I gave you 4 C's. My favorite C is that of connection.
Yeah.
To really have a human connection. And in some way, I think, I know quite a bit about dating sites. I was on the board of one of the dating companies and have done a lot of analysis with some of my student teams as well. And I mean, people are lonely. So I think you have to find a way that they can connect ultimately, I wouldn't think to a computer, but to another person. So that is the outsider's view of social media in gaming and gambling. Although I don't know. Talked to a couple of Singaporeans this morning who have a company in Singapore which do game analytics. And they said that in many cases, like the rich husband doesn't want his usually much younger wife to know that he has a gambling addiction.
No, that's true. And I think it's been an interesting development in our sector as well, where a lot of traditional companies, I think, thought their casino customers, for example, were a little bit reluctant to perhaps share with their immediate relatives or close people that, you know, I play casino. But then you had the emergence of the casino world and the social casino slots, which thrive and live on the fact that people actually share that they play these sort of soft game slots.
So let me tell you about a company in Palo Alto. They're called Bay Sensors. Bay, like the San Francisco Bay, Sensors with an S. The C version is in China, but there will be tomorrow. So the Bay Sensors has in many Palo Alto shops outward-facing cameras. So they have basically mobile phones with cameras like that one, and it observes people walking by on the street. Girl in her 20s, fashionable, blonde hair. Next one, guy in his early 30s, also fashionable. What else can I say? Sorry. So they keep a database, and now they take bridging online and offline. They take ideas from A/B testing at Amazon and at the Dunkin' Donuts. They try out whether at 9 o'clock in the morning, buy 2, get 1 free, or 30% off. Gets more conversion into the shop. It's really interesting how they measure stuff, namely the footfall there, and then do experiments as we do online. Now things get really interesting when you see that they next try to attach to that girl, blonde, fashionable, in their mid-20s, her MAC address. And today she might have her hair dyed, but it's still the same MAC address. So what is more you? You with the blonde hair, or is it your mobile phone? So over time, just by no expectation of privacy, people are walking on the street, they collect an extremely rich database. So, and now I'm coming to a punchline, if you're walking to that shop, they could greet you with an enormous amount of information. Like deal book, like Facebook, you know, where you get deals, you go in, they know who you are, they know you're looking more tired today than yesterday, but you're walking faster than normally, so maybe you're high energy or you're late for a meeting, who knows? But now, how do you want to greet that customer? Do you want to reveal that you Googled that girl who you're seeing tonight?
It's sensitive, huh?
Yeah, or how do you deal with the fact that, you know, you might have seen peripherally something about somebody, your friend's friend on Facebook. Do you want to bring it up in the next conversation when you see him?
Probably.
And how are the social norms shifting?
Yeah.
If I have a friend who posts, if somebody hits him up inappropriately, in his perspective, hits him up inappropriately on a dating app, he takes a screenshot and pops it on his Facebook. Now,
That's harsh.
how do we think about him? I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But how would you think about the other dude who... now, it's interesting. If we think the other dude actually was cool, then it looks pretty weird for my friend.
It does.
So it's just so interesting how these social norms are emerging, are changing, and I expect that the social norms in gaming are also emerging.
No, absolutely, and I think that's the touch upon what we discussed this morning as well is the fact that companies can start using the data, the knowledge they have, to actually create a more valuable offer. And I think that's what Amazon managed to do really well, but I think that this category is struggling a little bit and make all that data not scary, but rather valuable for the end consumer.
Yeah, but ultimately, it is only the consumer's opinion that matters.
Yeah.
If they think, I mean, Amazon used to say, the only reality is the customer's reality. I think that sums it up. So it might be so valuable, this valuable exclusive offer. Like I got this email this morning from somebody from Nigeria or something. He had an uncle or a great uncle who died and he got some money. So it was an exclusive offer for me. He reached out for me to help him out.
Yeah.
So actually, once we finish, I need to get onto that.
Yeah. As you should. It sounds really good.
Nigeria apparently finances a state budget on marketing. That's a different story.
Yeah, they're good at marketing for especially CRM marketing. We talk a lot about data, and big data is the new buzzword. Everyone needs to get on top of big data, and you have the big companies like Oracle and IBM selling solutions to get on top of big data. But
they sell the solution irrespective of the problem.
That is a very good interpretation, I would say. Would you say, in your experience, is data in itself, is it quantitative in its nature, or is it qualitative?
What was a noun in the sentence? What is quantitative or qualitative? What is a noun?
What is data in general? Or big data as it described in the buzzword today?
I mean, by its very nature, data, of course, is quantitative. But I would say that when I work with companies, it really is discovering other data sources that ultimately makes a difference. So it's qualitatively different data that help them solve their problem, more than just more quantity.
Yeah.
So I used to say that we moved from a world where we focus on algorithms, where $1 spent on an algorithm was more than $1 spent on data.
Yeah.
But I think we have now reached a world where $1 spent on data, particularly if you find different data sources, is better spent than another dollar on these already pretty well-established algorithms.
Yeah.
So in this quantitative question, one, you do have the flip from quantity to quality. Example is, there was a time when you needed to poll people. So random digit dialing, you call up people and say, what do you think about John? And people tell you or not, if they answer the phone. That is, people who have landlines, who can't afford mobile phones, right? I tell you what to think about John. On the other hand, now, we actually have every individual. And some things where we needed to sample, we don't need to sample anymore. We have got everybody.
Yeah.
So it is that tools have changed, but it's not about the data set. It's not about the tool set. It's not even about the skill set, although I do spend significant amount of my time trying to train students in that. Ultimately, it is about the mindset. And that's why I started off saying big data really is the mindset to turn mess into meaning or to turn mess into action.
think that sums it up very, very well. I think it would be very appropriate to take maybe a few questions from the audience. We haven't received any papers here.
Where
but,
is the paper?
Yeah.
I mean, we were bracing against, I was brushing up my reading skills,
bring them over.
skills. Yes, the first question. And there must be some question from the other side as well.
It's very long.
Okay, why don't you read it? Why don't you read it and explain it to us? Because I did brush over my reading skills, but that might be more than I've read in the last year.
Going back to the last slide you showed, you actually, the first point that was on the slide, it was about focusing on the problem to fix.
Yes,
That was
I
the
remember
first
that
thing.
one.
However, I mean, in my experience, the biggest problems that companies have is actually understanding the problem that needs to be fixed. If you spoke about Amazon, where you work, Google, Facebook, and Apple. In many cases, it was the founder that actually had the intuition to say that is the problem that we need to fix. So my question is, does it take always a smart person to understand what the problem is, or can big data actually give that snapshot in saying, actually, the problem that needs to be fixed is this one, and you need to go about in that way? So that is my, I mean, in my experience, and it's now a few years I work in strategy, the biggest problem that all companies face is actually understanding the problem is to be fixed and then go about it. And I've rarely seen data giving that sort of snapshot without a smart person that has the intuition to do that. So thanks.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
So
Thank you.
I think that whether it's Amazon or Google, in both cases, very smart people solve very real problems. As I said, 1 billion people think about buying stuff differently now, given basically the data Amazon has created. And 1 billion people think about information differently, about literacy. Just like the Gutenberg press changed the way people think about literacy, I think we now have seen the same change again. So I think they started both with problems 1 billion people have, not some first world problems. Buying stuff, finding stuff. Now what is different, I think, is that in this rich world of data now, what really changes is that we can get better matches. So for me, a product in some way is a match to something I might not have been formulating. Or think dating. Dating is about matching. It's about figuring out how compatible you are, what the time scale is of that. So I think data came to support the problem people solved, and not, gee, now we have all this data. What do we do with it? What do you think?
No, I agree. I think at least from my small perspective in this is that you can ask a lot of questions, but it's not until you actually have the data that you can start answering them to a certain respect.
It's a hermeneutic circle. It's actually a process that the data informs and reformulates the question, and you look for different data. So as a German philosopher once said, the problem is not to get out of the hermeneutic circle. The problem is to get into it. Or as Zippy the Peanut said, you just have to live with the data.
Good answer. Do we have any more questions from the floor? There's a mic coming over there, I think.
I started writing it down, but I'll just speak. I'm a policy guy, so I'm used to dealing with regulators and have done so for a couple of the companies you've mentioned previously.
The sound is not great.
If I come a bit closer to you. In terms of the, sorry, I'm Luke, nice to meet you.
Okay.
In terms of,
True.
so I'm CEO of the International Social Games Association, but I've done a lot of work on data protection regulation in the past, and that will affect any company trying to use data, in Europe or globally. Do you have any thoughts on the current kind of European data protection regulation proposals? Because a lot of the great examples that you've given of profiling people in the street, for example, is already illegal in Europe and will only become more restricted, that kind of activity. So is regulation going to stifle innovation in the development and use of data in Europe?
No, I'm not an expert on Europe, but smart people will always find ways of solving their problem. And for example, the deep cultural belief that we shouldn't discriminate by gender, which has made it in an EU, what is it called, proposal or?
Directive.
The data protection regulation.
Yeah, in an EU regulation. It's wonderful, I think, how we are now, we as citizens, are faced with a question about what do we want? We can't hide behind, oh, we don't know X, Y, Z. We need to actively decide. We, of course, do know X, Y, Z, like the gender of a person in most cases. But we don't want to look at this. We deliberately want to have a worse model. For instance, life expectancy. You know, it's different for men and women. And if you condition another couple of variables, you can really build a pretty good model for the average. But we decided, as society, or the EU decided, that that is a difference we deliberately do not want to take into account. I think it is not a technological problem. It's not about anything but how do we want the world to be. So it's not about predicting about innovation, but it's about creating the world we want to live in. And I think in all these cases, it is actually a dialogue which we have to have, whether we feel that we want to build better problems, we want to build better models, better in the sense of better accuracy, lower prediction errors, or where we feel that we don't want to take certain variables about a person into account. So the beauty is that technology is there, data is there. Now we have the problem in its really like crystal clear way, the real problem at hand. What do we want it to be? And that's a great conversation to have, and I just hope that the politicians who debated actually have made themselves knowledgeable enough to understand that it's not black or white, that complicated questions don't have simple answers, but, well, as society, we need to figure that out together. But I know with John, we have a person who knows much more about that than I ever will. What, if you pass the mic over, what is your opinion on here these questions we decided, whether it's somebody walking into a casino being recognized but wanting to be anonymous, or being pissed that he doesn't get recognized as a super good customer?
Don't break it. Thank you. If I can paraphrase the question is, should the business determine, or should the individual determine when they walk onto the property? What?
How do we get? Now we have removed all the technological barriers, and as we know from the NSA, you know, even if your government doesn't know it, the NSA knows it already. So, given that that's the case, we are now left with a pure question about what do we actually want, because that's what we ultimately will tell the politicians.
Well, I think that the consumer wants something necessarily different than the business. The business may want to make sure they've targeted the right customer. They may want to consider that they're following all the regulatory rules. The consumer wants entertainment, wants to be treated well, wants the personality, and wants the ability to socialize in some cases. But the science is determining the blend, and I think that's where you're going. But I think what's factual is those companies that are doing well have found something unique and different and special, which can be lost in the electronic world because they're not necessarily in the hospitality business. So I think the business wants to take care of their investors. The customer wants to have a great experience.
Now, let me pose a thought experiment. That's what physicists always do if they don't have their lab with them. Let's live in a world now where every single ad you see, you say, awesome, and you pop down money and you buy the item. That's world A. No attention wasted. And the other extreme, of course, people go on manipulation, etc. The other extreme, never ever do you ever buy anything that you see an ad for. Now, most people say, oh, this is ridiculous. I mean, both worlds are not acceptable to them, right? So then, what do you think? Is there some way in the middle which is okay? Is it 1 out of 10, 1 out of 100? Or is it, given that the two extreme cases are not desirable, there's no case of it being desirable? I mean, you just move the conversation to the next level.
Well, sometimes it's for peer pressure, if nothing else. They may not want it, but they could buy it because there's pressure, the neighbors have it, or I hear it's the right thing to do. There's that in the marketing side.
So why do people gamble? Why do people come to Vegas? I'm curious about this.
Well, whether you do it online or come to Vegas,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the experience, it depends. There are professional players, professional gamblers that do it for a living, and they're very good at it. A good share of them are mathematicians and brilliant folks that play. The others, some will come to the casino, at least the Nevada, New Jersey, US experience, for the hospitality, the socialization. But that is a blend and a change and a challenge for our industry today to make sure we continue. But whether it's to go to a day club in Las Vegas or in New Jersey, sometimes it's not just about gaming. It's, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, we've transitioned to shopping, to entertainment, to make sure there's an experience. There are those that will play by the day. They'll go to New Jersey or go to Las Vegas or some other resort around the country for the day. It's all different experiment and different experience. You'll be a tough instructor. So when does your class start? Tuesday?
I hate to tell you, but Thursday this week, Beijing. So if anyone wants more, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 8 hours every day. But now I hear we have to stop.
Before we go, I want to ask one question. So if you wanted to sit by a certain person on a plane, so you can do that? Or not want to sit by someone on the plane? You don't have to answer the question.
I think you have to make flights, friends with the gate agents.
I get it. Thank you. Outstanding job, both. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Nils.